Hello and welcome to The Actor and the Engineer. My name is Paul James. I am the actor.
And my name is Josh Knapp. I'm the broadcast engineer.
Here we go, Josh.
Oh, man.
Okay, before we start, I have to ask, do you know how to pronounce the actress's name that we're going to talk about tonight? Is it Demi or Demi?
I've heard Demi.
Okay, then we'll go with Demi.
I was more worried about Coralie Fargeat.
Fargeat. I've been practicing all day. I'm not going to do it.
And I've also heard people say Margaret Qualley. But I don't know. I'm giving up on that one. So today we're going to talk about Coralie Fargeat's film, The Substance. So, okay. So did you see the trailer? And then you didn't see the trailer, right?
I saw something, but who knows where, what,
okay.
What. I mean, it could have been from Cannes or the Venice Film Festival or whatever.
I've talked to a couple of people about this movie. I was like, you like body horror, right? And they're like, yeah, it's awesome. And then I was like, all right, well, have you seen this trailer? And they said no. And then I was like, all right, well, I mean, if you're cool with The Fly and even more extreme body horror, even like Beau is Afraid or Videodrome, I've got that in the background.
Which I love.
Yeah, so I was like, if you're cool with that, then yeah, you don't need to see a trailer. Like, you can just slide on into this movie. This movie, I am so glad that I went back and looked at Coralie Fargeat's previous film and short film. Revenge and Reality Plus. This is the short film, but Revenge from 2017. I'd never seen it. I'd seen a trailer of it. It was very neon tinged, stylized, and I was like, okay, this is just a stylized revenge flick, but it was a lot more than that. And I would say if I was to like tier them, I would put Revenge above The Substance. So I think that she was very ambitious with The Substance, and it takes a lot of guts to do that, and great performances from Margaret Qualley and Demi Moore and Dennis Quaid too. I just, after seeing Revenge, for me, it's a more complete film than The Substance was. So what did you think?
At the end, I didn't know what to think, but I like that. I don't necessarily want everything spoon-fed to me because I operate on a less extreme level when it comes to my interest in the arts. I'm very much a mainstream person on some level, but I do like to figure things out, and I do like to have questions, and I do like to be excited about what the possibility of whatever the next 5 minutes is going to be, whatever the next 5 minutes are going to be. I will say this, halfway through the second act of the film, I kept thinking to myself, it's not a film that I feel bad that I came out of a couple of times, because you almost, for safety of your own psyche and safety of your own soul, you got to come out of it a little bit and say, oh, okay, that iPhone went off. Oh no, let me be distracted. Like you need a little bit of a break, and it's 2.5 hours long, and it is a long 2.5 hours. It's
so
an
is it
intense
more self-preservation then? You were taking yourself out of it for self-preservation reasons?
Maybe you could say that, but my next statement's going to contradict that, because halfway through the second act, I was like, wait, what happened to the body horror? What happened to the...
Oh, geez.
It's not enough. There's not enough going on here. There's a lot going on, but there's not... And then I just had to quietly, very carefully shut my mouth because, man, the third act is... And I understand the topic, and I understand the themes, and I understand a lot of the issues from my perspective as a human being. I am very in tune to what women have to go through in this world. And I hesitate to say it, but it's balls to the walls. I don't know if that's an appropriate statement to make, considering it is a feminist statement that she's making, at least in my opinion. So I don't know what I was expecting. I was expecting some of what I got. Once again, you can't say enough about the performances. Demi Moore is outstanding. Margaret Qualley is as much of a lead as Demi is. Without her and what she does, the film doesn't work. I do have a lot of questions about the choices they made with the men in the film. And I know that's going to sound like a defensive thing to say immediately, but we're guys, and I see things from the perspective of being male. So luckily I'm in tune to a lot of different things. So I can at least open myself up to questions that are pondered in this film that I don't know if I have the answers for or the film answered, but I do have some questions about certain characters in the film and what they chose to do with them. And that is actually a compliment towards Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley, because they are so entrenched and so real and so vulnerable and so true to whatever they're doing. The other stuff seems too farcical for me.
First of all, the film is about a woman turning 50 and getting her show canceled, and then so she comes across this substance that supposedly allows her to keep her youth, but in a kind of roundabout way where there's a double that is much younger, and then they have to kind of share time in the real world. So yes, I loved the concept and the rules that were put in place, and the hurdles that were put in place to where you can see very early on through these rules that this is where things are going to go wrong. And
as soon as they say 7 days, I was like, oh, that's not good.
Yeah, and you have to tick-tock back and forth between the two bodies. Where I started to have problems with the mechanics of it is that these are the same person, but yet they don't know what the other entity does, and that really, really bugged me. And that was the main impetus for the rest of the film, for how they react to each other. They were at odds with each other, but at the same time, they were the same person. And so that's the frustrating part. I don't see how the film could be made without that, but the choices that were made as far as like the younger version decides to do exactly what the older version did, as opposed to something else, it was convenient. Portions of the film were convenient and led you down the garden path of the eventuality of the film, even though I did not know what happened at the very end was going to happen at the very end. I don't think anybody could know exactly that particular instance of what was going to go on, but they did kind of they dropped hints like that.
You
You're
can
right,
have
the
an
structure.
instinct that it's not going to go well when you realize it's New Year's Eve. She's the only person who can do it. She has a limited time where she's going to be out of town taking care of her. You can see something, maybe not that.
You don't know what it's going to look like.
Right,
and you don't know where it's going to break down reality-wise. And man, you should see Revenge, and and you should see Reality Plus also. It's only a 20-minute short, and it's really good. Like Reality Plus is very similar to this film as far as like doppelganger type things. Reality Plus very quickly is, if you don't like how you look, you can get a chip implanted in the back of your neck, and you get to pick your avatar, and other people who have the chip planted in the back of their neck can see you as that. As that supermodel or chiseled jaw man or whatever, they get to see you as that, and you get to see them as what they want, as their idealized physical version of themselves. But there's a kind of a recharge. You get it for 12 hours and then you don't get it. So similar to this movie, it's a, oh, I can't go out tonight because I'm busy. Oh no, you just mismanaged your 12 hours and you're not going to be able to see your boyfriend when you look hot, that kind of a thing. So it's a very similar thing, and it's a lot more poignant and it's a lot less grotesque, but it still has certain elements sprinkled in there too. But it's really well done. I mean, it is totally a Black Mirror / Twilight Zone episode, just straight out the gate. You know, it would be a perfect Black Mirror episode. So yeah, I mean, she knew what she was doing. That was back in 2014. She knew what she was doing back then. So, and
you can tell by this film that she knows what she's doing too. There's no doubt about it. But it brings me to my main issue with the narrative is there's no balance. There's no balance. Like, she wanted this, or she needed it.
Demi Moore's character.
Yes.
Elizabeth
Sparkle, which is hilarious. And I just watched Donnie Darko too, so I was laughing the whole entire time.
Sparkle motion.
So funny. It's hilarious what you laugh at in that film, and it changes. Donnie Darko, that is. Anyway, Elizabeth Sparkle wanted this or needed it or whatever. And by the way, side note, she was turning 50. Demi Moore is 61. So,
and they had to make her look way worse than what she looks right now.
I know. There was a point where when they were laying on the ground, both of them. If you had blurred your eyes, you couldn't tell who was who. And I was like going, to me, you don't need the substance. You don't need the substance. You're doing great. She's doing great.
Well, it's because I think it's because it gets to the theme of the film, because she's having to do all of these things, whether it's, facelifts and whatever, all the other things she has to do, being in the gym 6 hours
because
a day,
of the world,
because of how she feels that she's reflected that to the world, as opposed to what worth. She may feel like her worth actually is. So yeah.
So back to the balance question. My issue, or my question, was why, if she wanted this, Elizabeth Sparkle wanted this, and then when she realized what was happening, agreed to it, and the split happens. I didn't necessarily need them to know what was going on in each other's world, but I needed to see a benefit first. Oh, we got a new flat screen TV because Sue was able to get a bonus. So she brought home a big screen TV. Where did that come from? Oh, this new bathing suit that we both can fit into. Where did that come from? It's because Sue's doing so well. Oh, I have to sit home and blah, 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 blah. But I keep my apartment clean for when Sue comes. There needed to be benefits for each of them that they could at least say, oh, this is really cool. Look at the benefit of having a second person, or a chance to have downtime in this world where I don't have to go out and look beautiful. Let her go out and look beautiful. There had to have been a reason other than the psychological disposition of looking in the mirror and realizing you're aging in a profession doesn't want you to age and will not allow you to age, and completely gets rid of you when you do age. There had to have been a reason why it worked for them in the beginning, and it's not there. It just, all of a sudden they're at odds. And Sue could have gotten a new cleaning person, because you only see one cleaning person, and the place could have been spotless when Demi takes over for her 7 days. There had to have been a reason she chose. They had to have shown a balance. Immediately she's at odds with her second person, or her person who's the second, however you want to put it. And
double, that's what I was calling it.
They explicitly say, well, I like the way the food's defined. How's the food defined? Matrix.
The Matrix is Demi Moore, and the second person is I don't know.
However those were labeled, I accepted that as the terminology in the film. But so why not have a benefit to this thing working? And then all of a sudden she realizes that she's got her old job, or that she's this, because in the end, it became more at stakes for Sue's character than it was for Elizabeth's character. Elizabeth's character, yes, there were at stake things, meaning the decrepit body after she stayed too long, and she's got that, witchy looking finger and stuff. Which is also an indication of where the film is going to eventually go. That's going to blow up. And by the way, side note, makeup is incredible. When you first see her come out after all those extended days, and she looks the old woman, really old woman, that's really well done, because you can still see it's Demi Moore, but she literally, I felt bad for her. I was like, oh, she really has aged. Like, it impacted me deeply, and as well it should have. But there's not balance, and there's 2.5 hours of this narrative. It needed something peppered in there to see the two sides of the scales. I mean, for me at least.
And I think the initial concept is, hey, do you want to extend your life? Do you want to live a better life? Do you want to be more relevant in the world? Well, now there's a younger version of yourself that you're capable of having. But she doesn't get any of the benefits of the younger version of herself.
No.
So maybe that's just the cruel trick that the substance people played upon her, and she didn't realize it until afterwards.
But where was the moment where she tried to take control back? Where was the moment where you realize that Sue's got all of the cards? You realize that once Sue's out, she can stay days later, and she does stay days later and later and later and later. So where was the way that Elizabeth Sparkle's character controlled the situation? Okay, well, she thinks she's going to do this. Well, let me call the agent and say this. And she knew something about the business that Sue, being naive to the the new being new and naive to the business didn't know, and it undercut her once they became adversaries. But immediately they're adversaries. Immediately she's jealous. Immediately she doesn't like the fact that she looks better and she's younger. And immediately Sue doesn't like the fact that she has to be only 7 days. Look at me and I can't stay out. And that is played on for a long time in the film. I figured out justifications for most things I had questions for. Some of the themes and stuff, but I can't figure out why those balances weren't there. And there's a couple other times that I thought it should have been or could have been more balanced.
I thought we were going to come into this and you were going to just be glowing in praise on Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley's performances, and that was going to wash over a bunch of problems of
and it
the
does
movie. Well,
for about an hour and a half.
Well, and see, for me, I was expecting to be like, well, I didn't like this as much, but the style, the sound design, the score, the practical effects peppered in with a little bit of CGI to clean things up, it covers over a lot of the problems that I have with the film, to the point where I didn't necessarily feel like the film was over long, and I loved the just dripping with style of this film. I mean, I got Nicholas Winding Refn vibes. I got the David Cronenberg, obviously.
Lynch.
David Lynch. In fact, I did watch a mini interview with Coralie Fargeat, and she said that it was with Letterboxd, and they do like top 4. It's like your top 4 movies of all time. And it was Empire Strikes Back, Brazil,
I got that
Mulholland
too.
Drive.
I got it all.
I mean,
I thought about Brazil more after this film than I did about the film.
Yeah. So I mean, those incorporated in there were, I knowing that that's where she's coming from, and she had a whole story about seeing Mulholland Drive at Cannes, and this film won an award at Cannes, right? Yeah.
I understand why.
It won Best Screenplay at Cannes. And it was a Palme d'Or nominee. Now, she is a French filmmaker, and Cannes leans towards French filmmakers, which they can, because it's in France. I get it. And it won People's Choice at Toronto International Film Festival.
That's the one I heard about.
Yeah, I mean, and so those right there. All of that, and the fact that Universal Pictures shied away from releasing this film midway through production because they were like, we can't do this. This is too much. So Mubi, which is like a streaming platform that releases more independent films, picked it up. And so it's one of the bigger movies that they've released recently. In fact, that's where I saw Revenge and Reality Plus, because of course they're, pushing her other works. But I'm glad that I did watch those. I mean, Revenge is about a woman who gets sexually assaulted. She's out in a desert location with her boyfriend, and her boyfriend's buddies come for a hunting trip, and one of the guys sexually assaults her, and then she ends up being left for dead. And turns out she's not dead, and she's kind of pissed. So
I saw the trailer.
It's so much better than the trailer, though. It's really well done, and it does have that body horror element to it. It does not shy away from the grotesquerie of the men in that film. I watched The Substance and then watched Revenge. There are so many things that she kind of pushed out into the world in Revenge and then refined and expanded in The Substance, where you could see it. She was not paying homage to herself. She was blatantly stealing her things from Revenge. And bigger budget, they look better, they are, as effective, potentially more effective, but yeah, there's a few scene elements that are exactly lifted from Revenge and dropped into The Substance, and they fit. Most of them were about male gaze and trying to represent what women, I guess, may feel when men look at them, and how men look at them in a certain way, dismissively, in both films, and it's extreme in both accounts. The shrimp scene in this movie, there's a very, very similar chunk in Revenge, just like that.
I thought about Delicatessen when I was watching this film also. Yeah,
Janae and Terry Gilliam. I mean, wide angle, close up, intense sound design elements. That's that's their wheelhouse. So it's that extreme stylistic French affectation. So yeah, it took me about 2/3 of the movie when I was like, man, they're really leaning on this yellow coat. And I was like, oh, it's the egg yolk. That's what that represents.
Yeah.
And I was like,
I was
dang,
trying my damnedest
pretty,
to try to figure that. Yeah, I could
slick.
not figure it because it's a heavy
And why do
coat
both
for
of them
that
wear it?
LA.
Yes.
Yeah. There's one point where Sue does not wear it. Sue comes out later on not wearing it. Well, let me clarify something. I mentioned the length of the film, not as if 2.5 hours, it was hard to get through the length of the film. What I was saying was that I wasn't bothered by it being 2.5 hours. I thought that there was room to fill in some of these blank spaces, or at least what I thought were questions that went unanswered. Now, obviously, it is somebody else's movie, obviously, and they want to have the themes and the questions and the ideas promoted from what they want to promote. I get that. I just, there was time to put, to clarify some things that would have helped me. Let's just put it that way. But I think you are correct. I should have been much more upfront with how spectacular the performances were, but that did not outshine or help the other questions that I still have about why choices were made the way that they were. There were moments when the performances were just she's stunning. When Demi Moore is trying to figure out, or she's trying to get ready for that date, and she keeps going back to the mirror. Everybody's had that experience, first of all, with hair, with makeup, with dress, with shirt, with smells, whatever, like everybody's had that experience. But you could see it was so devastating because you could see in her eyes and in her soul that she was never going to get to a place where she was going to be comfortable with going out. And she was very slowly talking her way out of it and becoming violent towards herself because she was talking herself out of it, if she had ever really planned to go to begin with. Because the reason why she wants to go, at least from my point of view, was that she needed the validation of somebody her age, somebody who saw her for who she was, always saw her as beautiful, always sees her for who she is right now, even though this is the least of the usual suspects that she would go out with, but he's a connection to her past.
Yeah, he knew her before she was plastered on billboards and all that stuff. Yeah, correct.
And so that scene alone is award worthy because it's spectacular. And I think some of the things that she has to do during the whole body horror stuff, the way that she has to look at her leg and her finger, and then eventually sees herself in the mirror, and how she dips down and then looks up and then dips down really quick again in denial. It's an extremely well etched out performance. Even though Demi Moore has not come up a whole lot in our 10 years of doing a podcast, she has always been one of those people who I'm like, I like her. I just watched St. Elmo's Fire again a couple of weeks ago. Why? I don't know. I just felt like looking at it again. And she's one of the standouts in that film. She has a gravitas that the film kind of is missing. So I've always liked her. She goes all the way back to General Hospital when I watched soap operas with my mom. She was on there way back in the day. So I've kind of followed along, and, she has become the biggest box office star financially. And then she's married to one of the biggest movie stars, and then they have kids. And then she started to age, and she started to age, not meaning physically, just chronologically, right at the tip of when Hollywood went, wait, Meryl Streep is 40 and she's doing it. Helen Mirren's 50 and she's doing it. Renee Zellweger just turned 50. Why are we ignoring these women? And then they started to and then women became producers and directors and screenwriters and all that stuff. And Demi Moore was right on that cusp, and she might have gotten a little bit forgotten. She won't be from this point on. Whatever happens to her next will be Oscar worthy. This right here is Here's why she's not going to be Oscar worthy. Not because of the performance. The performance is Oscar worthy.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're not going to give it to Lupita Nyong'o for Us, or Toni Collette for Heritage, or Florence Pugh, Heritage.
No, it's Hereditary.
Hereditary. What did I say? Heritage? That's a song. Hereditary. And they're not going to give it to Florence Pugh for Midsommar. They're not going to give it to Demi Moore for body horror film. They're just not. And if she does, she will crack a lot of glass ceiling.
Yeah.
And I hope she does.
So this, I think, is her Pulp Fiction. This is her John Travolta Pulp Fiction. Like she is not.
That's a good way to look at it.
She is not. She has not acted or not purposefully tried to stay away from the limelight, for as far as I know. But there needs to be a somewhat high-profile, flashy thing to reintroduce the public to John Travolta back then, or to her now. And you're right. Like I'm excited to see what she has coming up in store next. Now that scene you were talking about where she's going through and doing her makeup, and it's I love the cutaways to the clock. This is the absolute worst for me because I'm just like, just fine, just go. You look amazing, just fine, just let's go. Come on. And so I'm kind of the opposite, but I don't have that internal thing.
Yeah, I was going to say
constantly
you
just like
think you're okay and you're ready to go.
I know. No. It's totally different. And it helps me by the shot selection and the shot length within the scene. It helps me to identify more with that character, which is something that I wouldn't normally identify with. So that's great. That says a lot for Coralie Fargeat. But it reminded me so much of the scene in Swingers where Jon Favreau calls the woman, and
worst.
Then he does the voicemail, and then and then he calls her again, and then he keeps calling, and you're just like, the whole time you're just like, this is a slow motion car crash. Don't do this. It's not going to work out. There's nothing good is going to come from this. And that's what I felt like as her scene went on in this film. I was just like, oh.
Well, what made it so devastating to me, and actually this might be a good reason why the balance is different than I was expecting, is that I thought this was going to be the one moment in the film where there was some form of, I don't want to say joy, because joy is too strong of a word, but some form of normalization of just feeling good about yourself, or just being okay with yourself, or just being and when she gets dressed up and she puts on the gloves and the dress looks great, and she kind of positions it, she looks great, and you're thinking she looks great, and she goes and looks in the mirror, and there's just a split second where she turns back and looks, and I was like, oh no. Don't keep going, get away from the mirror, like the mirror. Like go outside and just take your picture next to any normal person you see walking down the street. You will feel good. Yeah. So, and maybe that's why that balance is not there. Maybe those good things that happen to them when they split are not there, because maybe that's never how this character sees life. But we are a society where we are defined by what we do for a living. What do you do? It's what I do, not who I am. But for whatever reason, your identity gets wrapped up into that. So like if you say doctor, people are way more interested in you for lots of different reasons than if you say whatever else that's not a doctor. With women, it must be so profoundly intense, because not only are you defined by what you do and how successful you are at doing it, not only do you get paid 50% less than what a man does for the same job.
It's not 50% less, but yes, it is.
Well, half of what they normally get.
Well, no, it's 80 something percent.
Way to defend the patriarchy, Ken.
I'm not defending. I want for that to actually be a real thing that people understand. And if we use the wrong numbers, then it loses its power.
That's
it's
totally fair. Yeah. Totally fair. But on top of all that, they have to be judged and worried about how they look physically in order to accomplish a lot of the stuff that we just mentioned, the 80%.
Or even get in the door.
And I think that is pressed as much as it can be pressed in this film, especially since it's repeated 3, maybe 4 times about smile, that kind of stuff.
The Dennis Quaid stuff. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
okay. So you didn't like Dennis Quaid.
I didn't say that.
Okay. Well, you thought that the male characters were overdrawn?
Yes.
Okay. So first of all, respect to Ray Liotta. He was cast in this film and he passed away in an untimely manner right before they started shooting. Dennis Quaid kind of swooped in right at the last minute and said, I'll take care of it. And he was able to shoot back in, I guess early 2023. So,
wow, that makes it all different. It's like when you told me the thing about Reese Witherspoon in The Master, that she was originally supposed to be Amy Adams' character, and they both agreed or something that it wasn't the right fit or whatever, and then PTA cast her later on. But that thought of Reese Witherspoon in that character thrilled me in a way differently than I loved Amy Adams in that film. I thought she was brilliant in that. But you telling me Ray Liotta, brilliant? Are you kidding me? With his sandpaper skin and his like intense eyelashes and eyeballs, and
you can imagine those closely framed shots on his face.
It would have been crazy. It's not that I didn't like what Dennis Quaid was doing. I didn't see the balance in it. Even in the worst characters, the worst villains in movie history, there is humanity to them. There is even if the humanity is a manipulation of the other character, there's still a scene where it's like, I'm so sorry that you've no longer are a spokesperson. I really like you. I'm gonna be looking for you for something, blah, blah, blah. He just bursts into the scene, literally into the bathroom, and starts spewing off what he's really thinking and actually working on. And she overhears it, which, it's a trope on some level, that kind of setup. But so I needed some form of human trait that would have balanced the absurdity of the shrimp scene and the absurdity of the agent scenes and all that other stuff. I will say this. So earlier on, I said, I think I found a justification for all of my questions. Obviously, this is how men are seen by this film director on some level. Not all men. These men in this situation. Yeah.
I did listen to a couple of interviews with Coralie Fargeat, and she said that I think it was more along the lines of like, this seems like it's a caricature of a human being, but she has seen those exact mannerisms and that exact verbiage from real people, real men. So that's the kind of like, you got to take her for her word, but
no doubt. My skepticism to that is not about not taking her word for it. My skepticism is that I still feel like, as an audience member, to ground him a little bit would have been much more effective for me, because then I would have felt a little bit of empathy for him as a human being, and then have been like, oh man, this guy's the worst. He's the worst, period. I should have followed my instinct. That said, I also, it's good to know that she has, not good that she's met people like that, but she's basing that on people and like the smile thing. I was actually in a conference in a small group at a side thing, and we were all I don't remember where it was. I was trying to remember where it was today, but I can't. And I remember the guy saying to the women, if you smile at me, it looks like you're paying attention to me. It looks like you're more invested in what I'm saying. And I remember thinking to myself, I didn't know the smile thing at the time, but just doing a difference between men and women. And what I wanted to say was, what do men look like if they're not smiling at you? Does that mean that we look like we're intensely listening to you if we're not smiling? Like, what? I didn't comprehend.
It's the assumption that everyone's on the same page, that the woman is here to make the man's life easier or better. Where it's like, wait, we're all on the same page here, right? Like, you're looking for a way to make me feel more comfortable, or to make me like you more or whatever. So like, I'm going to give you a pointer and tell you that if you smile more, it'll be better. And it's like, well, no, she doesn't owe you anything.
I get all of that. The thing that I thought of later on was that, well, maybe on some level, she needs to exaggerate these characters, not so women will pay attention, so men will pay attention, because maybe men are not picking up on, and I'm generalizing, maybe men who act like that, maybe
are not going to see this movie. Oh, maybe they will, actually. Never mind. Keep going.
I don't know about
Body
that.
horror, okay, maybe. Yeah. Blood.
I mean,
yeah.
Will they understand it on a level that will help their behavior improve? I don't know about that. I don't know what's going to change that. But maybe those need to be so exaggerated that these things are so noticeable and we cannot deny those things. We just can't. I don't know.
Well, maybe it's one of those things where it's like, okay, so what if it's a scene where Demi Moore is across from Dennis Quaid and he's eating? That doesn't sound bad at all. I mean, that sounds like a pretty boring scene. What about if it's a scene where he's eating finger food? Okay, that's kind of a little awkward, maybe a little gross. What about if he's eating big, huge prawns with a bunch of like stuff sloshed on it and the camera is 2 inches away from his mouth? Okay, that's kind of gross. Okay, now let's add on extreme sound design and have just all of the, junk in his mouth sloshing all over the place and super loud in the theater. Well, that's gross. That's actually horribly gross. So maybe it's the sledgehammer version of this character versus the butterfly version of this character. I don't know.
Yeah, and I 100% understand that. For me to connect me to what I was watching, there is, everybody loves Hannibal Lecter. He eats people, but everybody wants to hang out with him.
Donald Trump sure does.
Oh, Lord. Don't get me started, but that's a good example of what I'm talking about. There is something about humanizing an absurd, obnoxious character that makes it even worse later on. But at the same time, it's not about me. It's about somebody else's vision, and somebody else's vision is not about how to humanize the male. It's about how to show people what females and women have to go through in this world to just make a living or to just be at the top of their game. So maybe it's not about that at all. And I'm just on some kind of DNA level defensive towards the idea.
As a kind of a bridge into the end, I didn't really care at all about the Dennis Quaid character at the end. He wasn't really a part of the film. His character was inconsequential right after the point where he gave Margaret Qualley the New Year's Eve gig. He was there and he was done and he gave it to her. So that gives us the eventuality of the final scene. But other than that, like he's inconsequential.
The only thing I wish had happened with Dennis Quaid at the end is if one of those big spouts of blood had gone right towards him and he had like gotten it all in his face and had to like almost drown from it and that kind of stuff.
So I think for me, once we get into the kind of combination of Elizabeth
the monster,
and Sue. Monstro Eliza Sue. Yeah.
There you go.
I was initially okay with it. And then I felt conflicted because I was like, okay, so is the filmmaker trying to tell me that this is the true representation of this character and that she's embracing this version of herself and for the first time being who she really is? Because that's kind of how the film progresses. It's like, I'm going to do the show. I have an arm coming out of the back of me and my teeth are on my breast, but I'm going to do the show. That's the part where I was kind of like, I'm missing something. Is this a good thing that she's to this point, or is this a punishment of the character? I wasn't able to square that. And then, you just throw some blood in there and some amazing practical effects. And then, and of course you have the requisite scene of somebody pulling out their fingernails and somebody pulling out their teeth. I mean, it seemed like we were devolving into B movie. Okay. Now 80s movie. Okay. Now Roger Corman film.
Yeah.
Like it just kept like chunk getting lower and lower and lower. Revenge, for example, never did that. Revenge stayed on that high A level and kept it throughout the film. And there's a gajillion gallons of blood in that movie too, but it's effective.
Well, maybe this is how a woman feels through a physicalization of a character. This is how a woman feels after being beaten up and twisted and turned and chewed up and spit out. So maybe this is the psychological, this is how this woman sees herself because of all of the stuff that she's had to go through. And, you know, I have lived in this business for this amount of time. Yeah, I'm aging out. You've kicked me out, or I've aged out according to your thing. But I'm back. I look as great as I did when I was in my 20s. I'm back. And that's still not good enough. It's still not finding the balance. It's still not finding the way that people are going to see you for who you are. And maybe the craziness of the way that the monster looks is the psychological ramifications of being pushed around and completely weighted down by societal rules that women have to go through. I don't know. I would like to speak to, I've spoken to one person about this, and they're all about body horror. I have not spoken to his girlfriend about it. I'd like to hear her perspective. She just wasn't at work today, so I didn't get a chance to talk with her. But I am curious to know, you know, like, are women like, yes, shove them all with blood? Like, how are they feeling at the end of this film? But that's really not my question. But go ahead.
Yeah. So Mike, and I guess maybe so, like, I can look at it a couple of different ways. I can look at it, is this how certain women see themselves when they look in the mirror? I don't know. I mean, it seems horrible to me. Like, I really would feel bad if that's what any woman sees when they look in the mirror. I mean, but I don't see, that's the problem. It's like, we've been led down the garden path when it comes to the activator and the different vials, and this is day 1 and this is day 2 and here's your food, and like all of that stuff is very prescribed and it's very strict in the rules, and we know exactly what's going to happen. But then once we get to the end, it's kind of like, hey, you know what? It's all up for interpretation, and it's not being explicit with what that particular thing represents, or what that particular version of the character represents, and that's frustrating to me. I'll come back to Beau is Afraid. Beau is Afraid was crazy from the very beginning. Like, we didn't know what was a dream, what wasn't a dream. It was all over the place. So like, you jump into that and you're like, all right, well, we'll figure something out, and I'll have my interpretation, you'll have your interpretation, and we'll just move on. Whereas this film feels like there is an interpretation. It feels like there is an answer, and I'm not picking up the right things from first watch to be able to pull it all together for me. So I don't know.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And I see exactly what you're talking about. My question is this. I read somewhere, Twitter, whatever it was, because I try to stay away from everything about the film that we're going to talk about until I actually see it. And then I digest everything I can get in, depending on how many questions I have. If I'm convinced I know what this film was for me, I'm coming at it like that. But this, I was like, what did the critics say about this? And somewhere along the lines, I read something. I can't remember if it was a critic or a person that was just commenting. They said, make sure you see this film with a big crowd of people. It is a lot of fun. And I went, what? And some people were laughing at things that I thought, I don't understand this humor if this is funny. Like, what? I don't get it. What is funny about this? But there were other things that I laughed out loud at that no one responded to. So I was like, humor is in the eye of the beholder. I get all that. So when I asked this person at work today who had seen the movie, was it funny? He was like, oh yeah, we were laughing the whole last 30 minutes. And I was like, were you laughing at the monster, with the monster? Were you laughing at the people? And he was like, I don't know, a big breast just comes popping out. And it was hilarious. And I go, yeah, I'm not saying that that's not funny. I'm saying that that's not funny to me. Like, I don't get the humor. But that said, you watch, an Adam Sandler film, okay? That's not any of the typical ones.
Billy Madison, Happy Gilmore.
Billy Madison, yes, Happy Gilmore. People find those films funny. it's not my style of comedy that I laugh out loud at, but I can understand why somebody would think that was funny. Not funny to me, and I didn't laugh out loud. I laugh out loud at borderline inappropriate things, like people tripping and stuff like that. Like, I'm not laughing at them getting hurt. I'm just laughing at the humanness of it, like the human quality that we all fall down, literally.
Yeah.
And so and how people, their genuine, honest reactions to things is what I think is funny. And maybe it's a nervous laugh or a nervous.
It cuts tension. Yeah, that's what I think laughter does a lot of times. Is it cuts tension. It's like there's nothing else I can do right now, so I'm gonna laugh. You know, I can't cry, so I'm gonna laugh. You know, whatever.
Well, I do both, so I just. They were asking today, when's the last time you cried? And they were like, about a month ago when I was at my friend's wedding. Oh, about 6 weeks ago, a friend of mine passed away. And they were like, when's the last time you cried, Paul? Last night.
Says the actor, though. Come on.
Yeah, I know, right? But it's a thing with me. Anyway, so I don't get that humor. I don't understand. Like, I don't even understand why people think that's funny. Is it because they were uncomfortable? I'm not asking for an answer. I'm just saying, for me, at first, a strange example, Rocky Horror. I don't understand camp. Like, my sensibility to camp doesn't, but eventually I got it. But that had to do with the music and the theatrics of it. And then I saw the campiness of it, you know, and most of the campiness came from, and I saw that movie a lot back in the day, midnight showings, with all of the speak back stuff and toast and rice and squirt. I mean, it's full-fledged on, I experienced Rocky Horror the way you're supposed to. And I get that. And every time Susan Sarandon puts the newspaper over her head and sings that really delicate part of that song, I laugh out loud because it's so absurd. But at the same time, I see the emotional integrity behind it also. This, it's not on my scratch and sniff card. It's just not.
Have you ever seen Mystery Science Theater 3000? Or...
Don't get it.
There you go. Okay.
I don't. I get it. Like, I see why you would think that was funny, but for me, it's not. I don't laugh out loud about it.
Yeah, and it's the so bad it's good type thing.
Right.
I don't think this movie is that, though. There's way too much craft associated with this film for it to just be like, oh man, look how crappy this is. No, this is people at their height. The group that did the makeup effects, which were extensive in this film, they did Titan. They did Raw, the Julia Ducournau films. Like, they're doing like serious big stuff that looks super realistic and takes so much time and so much craft. And I mean, like I talked about the sound design earlier, like it's so well done and there's so much care being taken with it. This is not even to the Roger Corman style type thing where it's like, hey, we're churning out, 100 movies a year. So we gotta move. This is not that. This is very controlled and crafted. And so I can't say that like, oh, this film was so bad it was good, or this. I'm missing something too. I feel like I'm missing
Then why are
something.
people laughing? Like, what is it? I'm not saying that's what I thought. Like, I get the so bad it's good. I saw Showgirls in the theater the first time when it opened. And I was like, wait, what? This is not, is this purposely like this?
I just recently saw it and I feel like Elizabeth Berkley's in a totally different movie than everybody else. If that character was handled differently, like the movie would not be as campy as it is. I don't know. It just feels like it's a totally But
the director allowed her to go there.
There you go. Yeah. So Suspiria, the end of the Luca Guadagnino version of Suspiria, has an insane amount of blood and goes places you don't expect it to go. And there's a lot of craft in that. And I had a lot of questions with that too. As I've revisited it, probably 2 or maybe 3 times since then, it makes more sense to me, but I still feel like it's over the top. And I think I'm probably going to be on the same camp as with this film.
Maybe it comes down to not necessarily what you think of the film, but how you feel when you're watching it. Maybe it's because I was squirming in places and I was uncomfortable in places. And there's some Kubrick stuff in this film too. The carpet. Did you know?
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah,
and the long hallway. Yeah,
and
the
then
carpet.
the kind of blood coming from the end of the hallway, like it looked like it was coming from the elevators.
elevator.
Yeah. So we've seen those kind of blood scenes before.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. If people ask me if I recommend this film, I will say yes, go see it. Only because I want to hear what they have to say about it to help me clarify how I felt about it. Do I recommend this film as like something, oh, you got to see this? On some level, yes. But it's not something that, unless I was taking a class or the director was doing a talk on it, a TED talk on it, would I probably watch it again? Because I got what I needed to get from it. I saw what I saw from it. I don't think any clarification of the film is going to make it easier for me to see that stuff later on. Like it did when you said, she says, the director said, I knew a person just like that Dennis Quaid character who spoke just like that. That doesn't clarify why those choices were made in this film for that character without that ounce of what I keep talking about, humanity, whatever you want to call it. So the feeling I'm taking from it at the end of the film, like, wow, that's so overwhelming, I can't even think about it right now, is maybe how people who have experienced what the two female characters experience in real life, maybe that's how they feel at the end of the day. And that simultaneously saddens me, and also I'm a little relieved I'm a guy, because that kind of pressure,
I mean, a lot of pressure. Yeah.
It's unacceptable. We need to turn the corner. It's unacceptable.
All right. You can check us out at actorandengineer.com. You can go to facebook.com/actorandengineer. You can find us on X, search for @actorengineer, and we're on YouTube. Just look for the Actor and the Engineer podcast. So we'll see you next time.